Welcome to the Downer Difference, the podcast where we explore the stories and the people behind Downer's success. Through our discussions, we'll uncover how our high-performance culture drives outcomes, how we deliver for our customers, and support each other to enable communities to thrive. My name is Mary Donohoe, and I'm here in the studio with my co-host, Elaine Turi.
The title of our episode today is Woman at Full Volume, and we'll welcome Emma Gamblin, National Manager, Facility Services.
Thank you very much for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about your role at Downer?
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Emma Gamblin. I'm the National Facility Manager as part of our social infrastructure business. My team look after a range of facility services contracts, mainly across transport sector.
So you're here today to talk to us a little bit about EmpowHer. So what is that network?
Yeah, so EmpowHer is Downer's female-led network, which has been launched as part of the new Downer culture strategy. EmpowHer is a network that was started at the start of 2024 and is a voluntary network, employee-led. We've got a governance committee of 12 fantastic females who come from a range of industries and roles within Downer and support and help us really grow and lead the strategy of the network.
So the Downer Difference got three focus areas. We own the outcome, we do it for our customer, we stand for each other. So how is the network connected to that?
Yeah, the network definitely embodies we stand for each other. It's about creating an inclusive space for females across Downer to connect, to collaborate, to support each other and to grow and develop through their careers.
Some other organisations have been in the press recently because of their very poor workplace culture. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen in terms of a backlash against trying to improve gender diversity within different companies? And why do you think that happens?
Yeah, I think for me, it probably happens for a couple of reasons. I think one of the things is around, people that maybe feel that there's reverse discrimination happening and people that are concerned that, potentially in this instance, males that may feel that they're going to be overlooked for promotions or roles because of gender targets that are set within an organisation. And then I think the other piece is around, employees that maybe feel like exercises around workplace culture are more of a tick box exercise than something that the organisation truly wholeheartedly believes in. And so I think from a Downer perspective, the things that have been put in place around EmpowHer and around we stand for ourselves, we stand for each other, is around, making sure that we have advocates. So EmpowHer not only looks for network members, but we look for network advocates. So those are maybe males within our organisation that can support the requirement of EmpowHer and support kind of the ethos of EmpowHer.
And talking about male, I think your chair is, or your sponsor, your exec sponsor is a male, right? It's Murray Robertson from our T&I business unit.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so Murray, I think, is probably the greatest advocate that we have with the network. We're very lucky to have him supporting us, I think, as someone who's advocated for women within his industry, but within Downer long before EmpowHer, and I think we'll continue to do that in the future. And it's, leaders like Murray that are willing to stand up and challenge maybe some of those unconscious biases that sit within our organisation to help grow a diverse and inclusive culture.
So EmpowHer has been launched about 12 months ago now, soon. I think it was launched at the International Women's Day, last year on the 8th of March. So what movement do you think you've created in the business? And is there anything that stand out for you leading that network?
Look, I think we've got some great reach across the organisation in terms of the number of network members that we've had signed up and the number of allies that we've got supporting. We've had some fantastic conversations out with sort of senior leaders across the business around how they can help embed EmpowHer within their teams. We've done a couple of online events which we've had guest speakers come and talk to people around things such as imposter syndrome, which I think as females in particularly a male-dominated industry is something that most of us face often. And so some really good conversations around that. But I think more than anything, it's been a fantastic opportunity for women across the business that paths would not have crossed otherwise to have connected, supported each other, and, some conversations that I've been involved in, but some conversations that I know people have had where people have felt really supported and there may be a situation that they're facing in their workplace. They didn't know how to deal with it previously, and they've had some other females that they can call on to get some advice and some guidance and some support.
Why do you think they wouldn't have crossed paths previously at Downer, Emma?
I think Downer as an organisation, I think like any large organisation probably is quite siloed in that we work sort of within our business unit, within our own teams. They're the people that you see on a day-to-day business, on a day-to-day. And there was never an opportunity for those people to cross paths. So someone I work as part of social infrastructure, my day-to-day wouldn't lead me to cross paths with someone that works as part of energy and utilities. But through EmpowHer, I've had some great connections into those business, which I think creates not just good collaboration from a female and from a gender diversity perspective, but just from a business productivity perspective, because now if I've got a question about something that's outside of my business unit or something pops up, you've got those connections that you can call into, and different ways of thinking, I think, happening within different business units. And so it's been some great innovation.
Have you got any good examples of where EmpowHer has had a really positive impact on a particular line of business?
In the RTS space, which is a space which I think, don't quote me on the stats, I think sits at about 12% females in the network. We've obviously had a couple of our committee members who sit as part of RTS and have promoted the EmpowHer within the network of their site. So up at, say, Auburn and Sydney, they shared that out. And now that group, when we have an online event or once a month, they get together, they sit around the table and they have a conversation that is with the women in the site that maybe wouldn't have had that connection in a formal setting previously. And it sort of creates that space where they can say to their managers, look, we're part of this network, we're part of this employee network, for 1 hour every 3 months, we're going to get together in a room and we're going to do some professional development, but also an opportunity to connect and support.
I think a positive change that I've seen as well with RTS is that they've joined the Rail Champions of Change network as well. That's an external network to Downer.
I think that's something that they see as being really important for their business unit. And I think across EmpowHer, that's something that, that's an example of, looking at those external networks that we can tap into for, external development, but also to learn from as well. And I think, some of the learnings from that can be brought back into EmpowHer and sort of helping develop the strategy moving forward.
Do you know how many advocates you have in EmpowHer?
There's about 180 advocates or allies, and we've hit recently just over 600 network members.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
fantastic. Yeah, that's really good. We had a really interesting experience. You joined a town hall in social infrastructure and citizen services, and we had a discussion about what an ally or an advocate was. Were you surprised by that conversation, or did you realise that some people maybe weren't sure about joining or if they could join?
I think it's something that is probably taken a while for those of us in the committee to get our head around how to best communicate that ally role. I really enjoyed, I think, in that town hall, we've had some really interesting conversations, where we sort of talk about the reverse discrimination component with males, and probably some males that surprised me that they had this view where they say, well, why do females get a special network and why do females get a special training course? And having to really explain to those people that, if you go to a standard Downer training session, you're probably going to be sitting in a room of, if 20 people are there, 18 of them are males. The gender diversity in those training courses is not there just generally. And I think in that, the town hall that we had with your team, there was a really, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but talked about the fact that, for him, the important thing around being an advocate was because he wanted to create a workplace where when his daughters come through the workplace, they don't have the experience that some of the people have in our organisation or in other organisations now. And I think that's really, for those advocates out there that have got, daughters or know of young girls that are going to be coming through a workplace, we all have to work together to make sure that we create workplaces that are diverse, not just for, not just gender diverse, but diverse across the board and inclusive to make sure that people feel like they've got a place.
And talking about training, Emma, is there anything that Downer provides for the women cohort in the business?
Thrive is a course, I think it started 4 or 5 years ago in the old Spotless business, and is a female development training program. So it's a program that runs across the full year and is really around professional and personal development. So lots of different types of sessions. We do some in-person sessions, some online sessions, but probably the biggest takeaway for me from Thrive is, again, those connections that you make with people that sit outside of your business unit that you may not come across in your day-to-day, but are a good connection. And I know for me, the connections that I made through Thrive are people that I will reach to and lean out to for support, moving forwards over the next couple of years and throughout my career.
Just going back to something you said earlier around the EmpowHer network and why do we need it? Why do you think we need it at Downer? I think you've got some good practical reasons as to why it's been useful to have it set up.
You know, we're an organisation, we've got 70% of our workforce are male. So we work in quite a male-dominated industry, but with some really ambitious targets as an organisation around our gender balance and where we're going to get to over the next couple of years. And I think you don't move the needle that significantly on things by just continuing to do what you've done for the last however many years. So it's important that we make some really bold changes around how we approach that gender diversity. And I think EmpowHer is a small component of that, in that we're bringing, females together, but also an opportunity and a place for females to share, what they find good and what they don't, what they would see as improvement areas working within Downer. The key for me around EmpowHer is making sure that as a group of females, we work together with our allies to create an organisation where women want to come and work, but not only come and want to work, but then they stay. And I think that one of the strongest recruitment strategies that we can have is that word of mouth. And if you say to a female colleague or someone that you went through university with or someone that you know in your network, Downer's a great place to work, then you're more likely to choose that as an organisation to go to.
And a safe place to work as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where people stand for each other.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Mary, for that segue, because one of the questions we ask our people who participate to the podcast is, what does the Downer difference mean to you?
For me, we work in a contract-based business where our customers have to be at the heart of everything that we do. So I think, that ethos of pulling it back to the purpose around enabling communities to thrive, if we keep that at the centre of the way that we operate every day, then I think we're going to set ourselves up for success. And I think those Downer difference, pillars that sit underneath that are really key. For me, I think we stand for each other. It talks about creating a safe space where people feel included, where we look out for each other, where we support each other. I think the best example of that in Downer is when we look at our zero harm culture. Zero harm is one of our key pillars, and it's something that we don't just talk about. It's not a tick box exercise. I think throughout the business,
it's very holistic, right?
It's very, it's in everything that we do. And I think that comes, that hasn't happened overnight, and it hasn't just happened by chance. It's happened, through a number of different programs and strategies, but it's also just happened through making sure that every leader or every employee that works within our organisation understands their part of zero harm, what they're responsible for, and how they can benefit that. And we don't walk past anything, in that safety space. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And I think if we take that same approach and that same principle around zero harm and apply it to, other things such as, our gender diversity and our gender balance as an organisation, then there's no bounds to, the successes that can be had.
Now, Emma, we've been asking everybody to tell us about their favourite book or one that they'd like to recommend to Downer, and your favourite song.
So my favourite book, I don't know if it's my favourite book. I think sort of when I reflect, it's probably the book that's had the most impact on my life is Brene Brown, Daring Greatly. And I think it was a book that I read sort of over that 2020-21 period where we're leading, a team of people through a pandemic and lots of uncertainty. But, for me personally, I was dealing with being, stuck in Australia with the borders closed to back home. My nana was going through a terminal illness and passed away, and trying to work out how to kind of, show up at work through that. And I think it's probably some of my own unconscious bias and probably some of my lived experience, in that I felt like to be a good leader, you had to show up to work sort of emotionless and show no vulnerability and really just take charge in a really professional manner. And I think that book really, showed for me, and probably came at the right time to show that actually showing up with vulnerability and having the courage to be yourself and share some of that emotion, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good leader. And I think, for me, that was a real turning point in how I led teams and how I show up to work as a leader. And I think, definitely, I look at my teams over the last couple of years, and I think we've created really high performing teams where we're all comfortable to be vulnerable. And, it's not always easy turning up and having that vulnerability in front of your team. Sometimes that's really hard, but sometimes that's where the greatest conversations come from.
And I think as well, personally, that's part of bringing your whole self to work too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is what my boss is saying all the time. And that if there is something I've learned and heard so many times about Downer, is having good people who bring their whole self to work. So it's pretty unique, I suppose. Yeah, pretty special.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you're trying to be someone that you're not at work, becomes really exhausting as well. And there's that real sense of when you're kind of trying to put on a persona at work. And so being able to to create a space where you don't, you feel that yourself, but it allows your team to feel that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the song?
Like any good millennial, probably the last as many years as I can think, the top of my Spotify Wrapped has been Taylor Swift.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think the song for me, and it kind of comes back to that same principle as Marjorie, which is a song that Taylor wrote about her grandmother, her late grandmother, and sort of the impact that she had had on her life, which I think is something that's really key to me. But there's a lyric in it that says, never be so kind that you forget to be clever, and never be so clever that you forget to be kind. And I think it's that same piece for me that people will remember how you made them feel long after they forget what you said to them and the words that you said. And I think that it's important that no matter, through business, you sometimes have to make difficult decisions. You have to have really tough conversations, and you can do that, and you can be good at your job, and you can be professional, and you can get good outcomes for the business and for the customers. But at the heart of it, you can always be kind through that process. And I think that's something that for me, outside of work and at work, has been a real ethos, and I think that lyric is something that I really connect to.
Oh, that's a beautiful message. Thank you.
Emma, who has been your most important professional mentor so far?
I have, not probably a formal mentor, but probably one of my last managers, Rod Johnston, was someone who has definitely had a profound impact on my career to date. He retired at the end of last year, or semi-retired. But Rod's someone that I've worked with over a number of years, and through, some really challenging environments, and really taught me that it's okay to turn up and, make decisions myself, and potentially it's the right decision and potentially it's the wrong decision, but he always backed me that we would sort of work through and support that. And I think that helped me personally, but it also helped me in how I manage my team. And I think Rod and I we both have grown a lot over the time that we worked together. I think there was a point where, we were starting to have lots of conversations around inclusion and what that meant. And, Rod opened up that I was probably one of the first stronger females that he'd managed in his entire career.
So what does strong female mean?
And I think it was just in terms of a female, potentially the first female manager that he had, one of the first female managers that he had managed, as opposed to, you work with females. I think he grew up as has worked as an engineer by trade for most of his life. So male-dominated industries, potentially where you see those females more in support roles, not so much leadership or management roles. And so we had some really robust conversations throughout that process, and I think both really learned a lot from each other. Rod really taught me, I think, the power of making sure that you always take time for yourself. I remember in my interview with him, they continued to ask me, but what about Emma outside of work? What about Emma outside of work? And I thought, Emma outside of work, like all I want to do is like my career is everything, and it's really important for me to, do this. And I'd been working really hard to get specific, jobs. I wanted to become a contract manager. And Rod really taught me that, yeah, that's important, but you also have to have things outside of work, because that's how you show up to work better.
That's the balance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever thought of any other career or any other occupation? Dream?
I think from I love the people side of things. So I think from a practical perspective, I would love to do a role where, I was able to do, more of that potentially in that sort of people and culture space. But I think if I dream big and there's no bills to pay and someone's written me a blank check, I've always dreamed about being like a wedding or an event planner, having a wedding venue. I love organisation, I love planning, but I love that sort of creating memories for people. So
yeah, that's great.
Talking about memory, what are you the most proud of achieving in the last 12 months?
Yeah, look, I think it's got to be EmpowHer. I think that, getting chosen as the chair of EmpowHer and then sort of being able to lead that program to where it is something I'm exceptionally proud of. I think that the network has had some fantastic success in the first 12 months. I think we've learned a lot about, how we're developing it and how we want to continue to grow it. And I'm really excited to see where that goes for the next bit of time.
So you're in for a second year?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Emma, for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to The Down a Difference on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and be sure to share it with your colleagues.